Hi, I'm Marlis. At my parents' party, in front of everyone, they said it. We're giving all the money to your brother. You're a failure. Handle your own life. I didn't cry. I sat there, holding a blank check they called symbolic. But worse than that moment was realizing they'd been erasing me for years. Quietly, legally, without a word. What my grandmother did next changed everything, but not the way you'd expect. Before we begin, where are you listening from tonight? And have you ever felt like your own family erased you? Maybe someone watching this knows exactly what that feels like. I sat in my car longer than I should have, parked right there in front of the family house. The house I grew up in, the house that never quite felt like home. The driveway was crowded tonight, polished sedans, luxury SUVs. Each one felt like a reminder. Success, status, belonging. Things that, in this family, I apparently never earned. I caught myself staring at the house like a stranger. A part of me wanted to drive away. But you know how it is. Some events, you can't not show up. Even when you know you're walking straight into something ugly. I finally killed the engine, grabbed my coat, and forced myself to walk up the stone steps. The porch light flooded over me as I reached the door. No one came to greet me. Typical. Inside, the party was in full swing. Crystal glasses clinking, conversation buzzing, laughter from the dining room. All those faces, some related by blood, most just orbiting the family like satellites. I hovered near the entrance for a second, but no one noticed, or pretended not to. So I moved through the crowd quietly, heading for the dining room. I knew my seat wouldn't be waiting. It never was. Look who finally made it. My mother's voice sliced through the noise like a knife. She was standing beside my father, both dressed sharp as ever. She smiled at me, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. I nodded, polite. Traffic. She didn't reply, just turned away, adjusting a vase on the buffet table as if that mattered more. I found an empty spot at the corner table. Not the main one where the family sat front and center, not even close. Dad raised his wine glass and tapped it lightly. The room hushed. Thank you all for being here tonight, he began, voice smooth like he was giving a boardroom speech. Tonight isn't just about celebrating another year. It's about celebrating the future. I knew what was coming. I knew. But hearing it still hit me like cold water. We've decided, my father continued, that the family's savings, $1.3 million, will go to Jareth. He's earned it. He's the future of this family. The room erupted in polite applause. Even some people who barely knew us clapped. I looked down at my hands. I didn't clap. And as for Marlis, my mother chimed in, almost like an afterthought. Well, she's always been independent. She knows how to handle her own life. The silence after that was louder than any insult. My throat tightened. I felt it first like a lump, then like a stone lodged in my chest. I wasn't even surprised. That was the sad part. No one looked at me, not Jareth, not my cousins, not even Grandma Anitra. Dad lifted his glass, smiling that proud father smile he always reserved for my brother. To Jareth. More clapping. Toasts. Cheers. I sat there, stone still, swallowing the taste of iron in my mouth. And in my head, one sentence kept screaming. I'm still here. I was right there, and yet invisible. The laughter around me dulled into white noise. My hands gripped the edge of the table like I might fall. After the toast, my mother approached. She held out an envelope, decorative, gold-edged, like a party favor. This is for you, she said smoothly. A little something from the family. I hesitated, then took it. My fingers were trembling. Inside was a check, made out to me. Amount, $0. For a moment, I didn't process it. Then I looked up. She smiled. It's symbolic, dear. Behind her, I heard a few chuckles. Not loud, not cruel, but there. I folded the check slowly and put it back in the envelope. My mother watched me like she was expecting something, gratitude, maybe. I gave her nothing. She walked away. I sat down. No, I collapsed into the nearest chair. I stared at the empty plate in front of me. I couldn't even taste my own saliva. Just numb. Just empty. I remembered being 10 years old, holding up my report card, hoping Dad would say something other than, "Good job, now where's Jareth?" I remembered the school plays I wasn't in, the birthdays forgotten, the times I helped without being asked, and was told I was too independent to need thanks. It had never mattered. I sat there in that corner, realizing something deep in my bones. I had never belonged to this family. Not really. And still, part of me wanted to cry. Then, out of nowhere, movement caught my eye. At the far end of the room, someone stood up slowly. It was Grandma Anitra. Her voice, quiet, but cutting through the room like glass, said, "Now it's my turn." My grandmother's voice sliced through the chatter like a blade. Everyone stopped. Forks hovered mid-air, wine glasses paused just before lips. Even my father turned, brows lifted, caught completely off guard. "You can celebrate your son, Delroy," she said, her voice steady, calm. "But don't erase your daughter." The silence that followed was almost physical. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few glanced at each other, unsure whether to react or pretend they hadn't heard. My father laughed lightly, that forced kind of laugh he used when deflecting in boardrooms. "Come on, Mom. Don't make a big deal out of nothing. Marlis is fine. She's independent. That's a good thing, right?" Some guests chuckled along, nervously, like they'd been cued. And just like that, the moment died. I felt something stir in me for half a second when Grandma spoke. Hope, maybe. Like someone had finally noticed. Like maybe someone would stand up for me. But when she sat back down, her hands folding neatly in her lap, that flicker snuffed itself out. She wasn't going to fight them. Not tonight. I tried not to look at her again. Instead, my gaze wandered, looking for a place, any place where I wouldn't feel like I was suffocating in this room full of people who supposedly knew me. And then I saw him. My uncle. Dad's younger brother. The one who, years ago, had pulled me aside after a family barbecue and said, "Don't listen to your dad. You're the future of this family, Marlis. You've got what it takes." I'd believed him. Now, across the table, I saw him laugh at something Dad said. I watched him avoid my eyes. He chose them. I don't know why, but that cut deeper than anything my parents had done tonight. Betrayal doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it's silent. A glance away. A conversation not started. A seat not offered. I stood up too fast, chair scraping against the floor. Heads turned briefly before looking away. I needed to sit somewhere. Anywhere. At the main table, where my father and brother basked in attention, I noticed something strange. Subtle. The name cards arranged perfectly in front of each seat. Mine wasn't there. I scanned twice, 3 times. Nothing. No name. No place. It hit me harder than I expected. For a moment, I stood there like a guest at someone else's wedding, trying to pretend I wasn't completely lost. No one said a word. No one offered me their seat. I backed away, careful not to make a scene, careful not to let the shame on my face be visible. Moving toward the back, near the serving station, I found it. A single empty chair, pushed up awkwardly against the wall, near the swinging kitchen door where servers moved in and out, carrying trays they weren't even trying to hide anymore. To them, I wasn't family. I was just someone in the way. I sat down. And the seat. It felt colder than stone. I rested my glass on the small side table, stared at the condensation forming along its surface, and told myself not to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. But sitting there, alone, invisible, listening to the laughter I used to chase after as a kid, I realized something else. This chair wasn't new. It had always been my place. I remembered birthdays where my cake was an afterthought. Graduation nights where Dad shook Jareth's hand like a CEO passing the torch and barely looked at me. Promotion after promotion at work, and never once a "we're proud of you." I'd been the backup plan. The family's insurance policy, kept quiet in the corner until needed, and never needed. Tonight just made it literal. I ran a finger along the edge of the chair, its surface chipped and worn, probably dragged out from storage. I could either cry here, in front of them all, or go numb. I chose numb. It was safer. I lifted my glass, more for something to do than anything else, and watched the reflections dance against the ice. My hands were steady now, steadier than my voice would have been. And then, something pulled at me. I looked up. Across the room, through the glitter of wine glasses and flashes of cameras, Grandma Anitra watched me. Her face was unreadable. No smile, no frown, no apology, just that gaze. She didn't blink, didn't look away. I wanted to look down, pretend I hadn't seen her, but I couldn't. Something about that steady stare. It felt like a question I didn't yet understand. And somewhere inside me, even in that cold chair, a seed was planted. That morning, sunlight felt like a lie. I'd barely slept. I lay in bed long after dawn, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of breakfast trays being wheeled down the hallway, of polite conversations, clinking cutlery, as if last night hadn't happened, but it had. I forced myself up. Showered. Dressed. Not because I felt ready, but because not showing up would have given them another reason to call me fragile. When I stepped into the dining hall for the brunch, the air smelled like citrus and coffee. Voices hummed together like a backdrop to the clatter of silverware. It looked warm, inviting. I felt cold inside. Mom spotted me first. "You're here. That's good," she said, with the same tone someone might use when seeing a neighbor's cat wander into their yard. I nodded, unable to find a word that felt worth saying. Being here wasn't strength. It was obligation. I sat at a corner table near the window, where no one would notice whether I was smiling or crying. And while their laughter carried through the morning light, my mind carried me elsewhere, years back. After Grandpa died, the family fell apart in quiet ways. Not with screaming, with meetings, endless meetings. I was the one who stayed. Dad said he was too busy. Mom didn't understand the numbers. Jareth wasn't ready for that responsibility yet. So I worked. At 26, I was in the lawyer's office every other day, poring over spreadsheets, legal documents, corporate records that Grandpa had left behind in chaos. I remember late nights, eyes burning, fingers aching, knowing I wasn't just fixing numbers. I was saving what Grandpa built. And when it was done, when the restructuring papers were signed, I remember standing there proud. Until I read them, the new company structure. Every asset, every controlling vote, transferred under one name. Jareth. I confronted Dad that evening, shaking. "You're not cut out for leadership," he said simply, not even looking up from his scotch. "We're protecting you from failing." I remember the way those words broke something inside me. I didn't even argue. At the brunch table now, my hands trembled just remembering it. They hadn't stolen my work with a knife. They'd done it with a signature. A quiet, professional erasure. I thought loyalty was enough. I thought if I gave enough, worked enough, stayed silent enough, they'd see me. I was wrong. They wanted my labor, not my presence. They wanted my effort, not my name. A sudden burst of applause jolted me back. Dad was standing again, raising his glass to Jareth, who sat, modest smile in place, soaking in the attention. "To Jareth," Dad said, voice warm with pride. The builder of our future. I heard it, and before I knew what I was doing, my hands moved. I started to clap, out of habit, out of conditioning, out of years of applauding my own erasure. I stopped halfway. My palms hovered mid-air, open. It hit me. I was celebrating my own disappearance. I lowered my hands slowly. No one noticed. Why would they? I looked down, swallowing the shame so thick it burned. But then, across the room, I met her eyes. Grandma. She wasn't clapping. She wasn't smiling. She just looked at me. And this time, she nodded. A small, almost imperceptible nod. But I understood. She wasn't going to save me. She was showing me that I could save myself. I looked down at my hands, at the fingertips still trembling slightly, and the thought came, uninvited but clear. They didn't steal my foundation overnight. I handed them the bricks, one by one, and with that, something inside me shifted, not into anger, not yet, but realization. And sometimes realization is more dangerous than fury. That realization wouldn't let me breathe. After brunch ended, I stayed at the table long after most guests wandered off to the terrace for drinks. I watched the shadows stretch across the walls of the estate, sunlight pooling on the polished floors like it didn't belong here either. And when the room emptied, I found myself standing, walking. I wasn't sure where I was going, until I saw her door. Grandma Anitra's apartment was attached to the main house, but felt like a world apart. The hallway smelled of cedar and old books. I hesitated before knocking, my hand trembling. She opened the door before I even touched it. "It's time," she said softly. No judgment, no welcome, just inevitability. I stepped inside. Her apartment was small, but filled with memories. Shelves lined with legal books, framed black and white photographs of people I recognized only from family stories, and a quilt draped over the couch, stitched by hands long gone. I sat where she pointed, a worn armchair facing her. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then Grandma said, "I should have told you sooner." My throat tightened. Told me what? She reached for a thin wooden frame on the bookshelf. Inside wasn't a photo. It was a property deed. Old. Faded. "This house was supposed to be yours," she said quietly. I didn't understand. She kept her gaze steady. "After your grandfather died, your father promised me, swore to me, that I'd have this estate for the rest of my life. And after me, it would go to you. That was your grandfather's wish." I felt my stomach lurch. She continued, voice brittle. "But 2 years after he died, Delroy changed the paperwork, quietly. He added Jareth's name. Took yours off before you ever knew." I shook my head, unable to process it. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because he's my son," she whispered. "I kept believing he'd remember that." She looked smaller somehow, older. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't the only one who'd been erased. She'd been erased, too. We were just 2 different versions of the same betrayal. She, out of loyalty. Me, out of neglect. I wiped my palms against my knees, struggling to find words. "Why now? Why tell me now?" Her voice cracked. "Because I can't protect you anymore." She reached for a small wooden box on the side table and opened it. Inside, folded carefully, was a single sheet of paper. She handed it to me. It wasn't the deed. It was a contract. Not notarized, not official, but signed. A promise. I read my father's name, scrawled in familiar ink. The wording was simple but clear. The estate was to remain in Anitra's possession for her lifetime, then transfer to me. "This is your proof," Grandma said softly, sliding the page closer. I stared at it, and I froze. Proof of what? That my father was a liar? That the people who raised me, who taught me to say please and thank you, who once tucked me into bed, had also stolen everything I built, everything I was supposed to inherit? My fingers hovered over the paper, but I couldn't touch it. "What do I do with this?" I whispered. Her answer was quieter still. "Whatever you choose next, just remember who you've always been." The silence between us said everything else. I sat there for a long time, the document untouched in front of me, while sunlight crept slowly across the floorboards. And when I finally stood, I folded the paper without looking at it and tucked it into my jacket. A weapon? Or a goodbye? I didn't know. When I left her apartment, the hallway felt longer, each step heavier. I told myself I'd think, weigh my options, sleep on it. But the moment I stepped outside, the betrayal found me first. I stepped out into the evening, thinking I'd find air. Instead, I walked straight into something else. The party had moved outside while I'd been in Grandma's apartment. The backyard was draped in string lights, soft music humming from hidden speakers. Tables were set around the manicured lawn, guests clustered in neat circles, drinks glinting under the lights. But the moment I crossed the threshold, I felt it. Not silence, not exactly, avoidance. People saw me, and then they didn't. It was worse than whispers. Worse than stares. It was a deliberate turning away, the slow, collective decision to pretend I wasn't standing there, to pretend I'd never been. Then my father's voice rose above the music. "Family! Friends! Can I steal your attention for just a minute?" I froze where I stood. He was standing near the terrace, a microphone in hand, beaming like the proud patriarch he loved to pretend he was. People turned toward him easily, welcoming. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. "Tonight," he said smoothly, "I'm proud to announce something special." His gaze skimmed the crowd, but didn't land on me. The Family Foundation, what many of you knew as the Harris Legacy Fund, is getting a new name. A ripple of interest. Some leaned forward. My legs went cold. "From today forward," my father continued, "it'll be called the Jareth Harris Foundation." Applause broke out. Enthusiastic, loud. In the noise, no one noticed that I'd stopped breathing. The foundation was mine. Founded after college, named after my grandfather, built during years I'd worked 2 jobs and donated every spare dollar I had to keep it alive. But now, it had a new name. His. My brother's. I remember looking down at my hands. They were shaking. Not with rage. Not yet. Just emptiness. I wasn't angry. I was nothing. Around me, people clapped. Someone next to me, maybe a cousin, maybe a neighbor, brushed my shoulder lightly. "Congrats." I didn't answer. I don't even think I looked up. Then I felt the strangest thing. I felt my own hands moving, applauding. I'd started clapping, without realizing. Out of habit, like some part of me believed I should. I caught myself, fingers midair, and jerked my arms down so fast I nearly dropped the clutch I was holding. I wasn't just being erased, I was applauding it. I could hear my own heartbeat, pounding louder than the applause, louder than the music. I tried to steady myself, focus on the gravel path beneath my feet. That's when Raina found me. I hadn't seen her approach. Raina, once the family accountant before she'd mysteriously retired last year. Now, apparently, a guest. She touched my elbow gently. "You need to see this," she said softly, and pressed an envelope into my hand. I didn't react, not right away, but something about her tone, or maybe the look in her eyes, made me close my fingers around it. Raina didn't explain. She just walked away. I stood there a moment longer before, finally, my legs obeyed. I walked, past the edges of the party, beyond the tables, until I stood near the stone fence lining the far end of the estate. There, under the shadow of a twisted oak tree, I tore open the envelope. Inside were copies of financial records, letters, donation receipts, all signed in my name. I flipped through them with shaking fingers. Founding donor, Marlis Harris. Original foundation documents. My documents, buried. Because now, officially, I wasn't just cut out of the narrative. I'd been legally erased. My father hadn't just taken my name off the foundation. He'd retroactively rewritten history to make it look like I'd never been part of it at all. I felt the papers slipping from my hands. I barely caught them before they hit the grass. And I stood there, alone in the dark, clutching proof that didn't matter to anyone but me. I thought, if I fight now, I lose. I lose them. Whatever scraps of family I still believed I had. But if I stay quiet, I vanish. I looked down at the envelope, at the heavy proof of everything I had once believed in. Then I turned my back on the party and walked into the darkness. I let the tears fall. For the first time that night, I didn't wipe them away. "I'm done," I whispered. I meant it. Or I thought I did. Because someone wasn't done with me. I didn't remember walking back to Grandma's apartment. I just found myself there. I didn't knock. I didn't think. I pushed the door open like I'd done as a child after bad dreams, when her arms were the only place that felt safe. But tonight, I didn't want arms. I wanted silence. So I curled up in her old armchair, pulled my knees up, and tried to disappear into myself. My mind wouldn't settle. I'd thought the worst was behind me. That foundation toast, the stolen applause, the envelope from Raina burning in my pocket. It should have broken me, and maybe it did. Because sitting there, in that small apartment that smelled faintly of lavender and dust, I told myself something I never thought I'd admit. I've lost. I was never meant to win. And for the first time that night, I believed it. I must have sat there for an hour before I realized I wasn't alone. I heard the door close softly, the light click of old shoes crossing carpet, and then the gentle creak as someone lowered themselves into the chair beside mine. I didn't need to look. I knew it was her. Grandma Anitra didn't speak. Not for a long time. She just sat beside me, breathing, waiting. Finally, after what felt like forever, she said a sentence so quiet I almost missed it. "I let them take your grandfather from me. I won't let them take you too." That was all. And it shattered me. I didn't cry like I expected. Not at first. My throat closed up, and tears blurred my vision. But the sound never came, because her words didn't make me sad. They made me feel seen. I was no longer invisible. I don't know how long we sat there. Just her presence, quiet and steady, felt like a lifeline. And somewhere from the depths of my exhaustion, a memory floated up. I was 6. At the community pool, the shallow end, where I'd slipped and gone under, flailing, silent, too panicked to even scream. My parents hadn't noticed, but she had. I remembered her arms pulling me out, the way she didn't say a word, just held me tight on the cold concrete until my breathing slowed. Tonight felt exactly like that. And as I sat there, shaking, I realized something simple but terrifying. She was the last thing tethering me to who I was. She was my anchor. I felt her shift beside me. Then the sound of a drawer sliding open. I looked over, not at her face but at her hands. She was holding a folder. Without a word, she placed it gently in my lap. Inside were papers, documents, and a small battered digital recorder. "These are yours," she said softly. "Not for revenge, for justice." I forced my numb fingers to work. I opened the folder. The first thing I saw were original ownership documents for the estate, my grandfather's will. Handwritten agreements, signed, never revoked. Proof that the house we were sitting in, the house my father had claimed as his empire, wasn't his to claim. Then, the audio file. She told me what it was, though I didn't dare play it yet. A confession. My father, years ago, admitting to altering the property deed. His voice. Recorded. Undeniable. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I looked up at her, desperate, lost. "I don't know if I can," I whispered. "Can what?" "Fight. I don't know if I can do this. If I use this, am I just becoming them?" Her expression didn't change. "It's not about taking what's theirs," she said, her voice like stone. "It's about reclaiming what's yours." And there it was, a line drawn between surrender and something else. I sat still, staring at the papers, the recorder, her steady hands. Then, slowly, I looked at my own. I'd always thought my hands were weak, empty. Now they held proof that I mattered, that I existed. And for the first time, maybe in my whole life, I felt something stronger than fear. Resolve. I lifted my head, wiped my face, and whispered, not to her, but to myself. "Then I'll stop being the failure." Grandma didn't reply. She didn't need to. I stood up, took the folder, and for the first time that night I stood straight. That night, I didn't sleep. I planned, not in anger, not even in pain, just clarity. Cold, deliberate clarity. For 2 full days, I shut the world out. I stayed mostly in Anitra's apartment, where the old silence of her shelves and law books became my company. She rarely spoke, just watched as I went through document after document. I think she understood better than anyone. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was unlearning silence. I met with her lawyer, a man with a voice like a court stenographer and eyes that didn't blink. We worked through the contracts, the ownership papers, the hidden promises buried under years of family signatures. He spoke little, but when he slid a specific folder across the table, I knew something had shifted. It wasn't a discovery. It was a weapon. A forgotten clause buried in the charity's founding paperwork. A clause naming the founder, me, as the rightful controller of the foundation, unless explicitly revoked by my consent. Consent I never gave. A contract my father had simply assumed I'd never read, much less enforce. I stared at the reactivation notice in front of me. The lawyer said without emotion, "They assumed you wouldn't." I signed. Not with anger, with clarity. When I left that office, I didn't feel like the girl they'd erased. I felt like someone about to stop erasing herself. 2 days later, the community event arrived. A gathering of donors, local leaders, city officials, every person Delroy needed to see him as respectable. It was held at a historical venue downtown. Stone walls, stained glass, legacy, packaged for sale. They were there early, of course. My mother, hair perfect, eyes scanning the crowd like it belonged to her. My father, shaking hands like the politician he wasn't, smiling that smile he reserved for strangers he needed, and Jareth, standing behind them, like an afterthought who somehow got promoted. I didn't rush. I waited until the introductions were nearly done, until Delroy stepped to the podium, microphone in hand, and began announcing the future of our family foundation. His words barely registered. Something about community, legacy, Jareth leading us into the next chapter. Laughter, polite applause. Then I walked in. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I simply crossed the hall, slowly, directly, cutting through the rows of chairs like they weren't there. Conversations died around me, not out of respect, but out of confusion. Delroy saw me first. His voice stumbled mid-sentence. His smile faltered, then froze. Carlene saw me next. She actually whispered, audibly, "Not here. Not now." I kept walking. At the podium, Delroy recovered just enough to try. "Marlis, if you'll join us." "No." My voice wasn't loud, but it was final. I reached into my bag. I pulled out the folder Anitra's lawyer had prepared. Not papers to threaten them with, but papers to remind them. Quietly, legally, irrevocably. I placed the original ownership documents on the podium, alongside the signed contract granting me control over the foundation, papers I now owned, in every sense. Delroy stared at them like they might catch fire. Jareth looked like he wanted to vanish. Carlene's hands shook as she clutched her pearls. I said nothing for a long moment. Then, softly, calmly, "This rebranding is invalid. I retain full control over the foundation. Effective immediately." Silence. Not polite, not respectful. Just absence of excuses, of their version of the story. I turned, looked at them, not as a daughter begging for approval, but as a woman finished begging. "I didn't need to win," I said. "I just needed to stop losing." Then I stepped back. Delroy opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Carlene's lip trembled, but no words followed. "Jareth." He looked at me like, for the first time, he wasn't sure whose side he was on, maybe his own. And for the first time, I realized something. Silence wasn't their weapon anymore. It was mine. I let it linger. As I stepped out from the community hall, I barely made it 3 steps before I heard him. "Stop right there." I didn't turn. Not until Delroy's voice cut through the quiet like a siren. People nearby froze. Donors, colleagues, neighbors. Faces I recognized from childhood cookouts now watched like they were waiting for a show. Then he said it, loudly. "She forged those papers. She manipulated my mother." I turned slowly. Delroy's face was red, his jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. In his hand he held a folder, one I hadn't seen before. He held it up like a weapon. "This," he said, "this is the real document. The one where my mother revoked everything she just told you. My daughter's a liar." Gasps rippled through the group. I caught glimpses of confused stares, whispers swirling between the donors like wildfire. Carlene was beside him, her hand on his arm, nodding. "Don't believe her. You know how she's always been." It hit harder than I expected. Maybe because part of me hoped they wouldn't go this far. Maybe because I wasn't ready to see my own father calling me a fraud in front of the people who used to hand me cookies when I was 6. I glanced around. No one moved. Not a single person stepped forward. I felt my throat tighten. This was the final blow, wasn't it? The part where they'd erase me for good, and this time, people would cheer as they did. Delroy shook the folder again. "She's been plotting for years, even using my own mother's grief against me." I stood there, silent. Then, from behind me, a voice I knew. "Enough." Anitra. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. I turned as she walked forward, cane in hand, moving slower than usual but steady. Beside her, Mr. Forrester, the family lawyer, followed, holding a locked document case. Delroy's voice cracked. "Mom, you know what you signed." She met his gaze, her expression flat. "I know what I never signed." Then she nodded to Mr. Forrester. I watched, numb, as he opened the case right there in the hallway. From inside, he pulled out a sheaf of papers and a small digital recorder. He clicked it on. Delroy's voice played in the air. I changed the deed without telling Mom. What was she going to do? She's too old to fight me. The words weren't old. The recording wasn't years ago. It was recent, sharp, clear. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the whispers turned. Delroy's hand shook. The folder he held dropped to the floor. Beside him, Carlene's face crumpled. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. I could feel something shifting in the air. For years, every room I entered felt like it pushed me out. Now, people stepped back from him. Jareth, standing behind them, looked away. He didn't move to his father's side. Delroy staggered. No, you don't understand. But no one listened. No one believed him. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. For once, silence was mine. I let it swallow him. Mr. Forrester turned to me, placing the final signed documents in my hands. My control over the estate, my legal position at the foundation, everything they'd taken. Anitra touched my shoulder. Now it's yours. Do better. I looked down at the papers, felt the weight of them, and yet I felt nothing. Not triumph, not satisfaction, only exhaustion. My father was collapsing in front of me. My mother was silently weeping. My brother didn't even try to save them. And me? I had won. But I didn't feel like I had. Weeks have passed. People tell you time heals things. But what I've learned is, time doesn't heal. Time just makes things quieter. My phone hasn't rung. No surprise there. Jareth never called. Not even a message. Carlene sent one email, exactly 6 words. We hope you're satisfied. Goodbye. I didn't reply. I wake early now, out of habit, not need. Some mornings I sip my coffee before the sun comes up, sitting on the porch that used to belong to my grandmother. Now it belongs to me. I look out over the quiet yard, the same one where every family photo was staged like a magazine ad. No photographers now. Just me. And the silence. Anitra's home. My home. It feels too big, too hollow. But it's real. I've started small, one room at a time. I moved into her guest bedroom. The master suite feels too large, too much like Delroy. Maybe one day I'll step into it, not yet. I've been volunteering at the charity again. Not as the face, not yet. I answer phones, process forms, handle the things no one notices but that keep everything running. It's strange, finding peace in being unseen when invisibility once felt like punishment. But this time, it's on my terms. Every morning, after coffee, I do the same thing. I place one chair on the porch. Just one. Simple. Wooden. I bought it myself from a small furniture shop nearby. It matches nothing in the house. People might call it ugly. But to me, it's familiar. It's the same type as that chair they gave me at the party. The one shoved against the wall, next to the kitchen doors. The one that told me exactly where I stood. But now that chair isn't a punishment. It's a choice. I sit in it. I rest my coffee mug on the armrest, and I watch the sunrise. I tell myself, I never needed their table. I just needed my own seat. When Anitra passed, it was quiet, just like she wanted. She left me a letter. No money, no property in the letter. Those came through the lawyers. The letter was different. It was written in her handwriting, shaky but steady. Don't build walls, Marlis. Build doors. Even if no one comes. I sat with those words for days, wondering what she meant. I think I understand now. She wasn't telling me to forgive or forget. She was telling me not to close myself off entirely, not to become like them. It's tempting, you know. After betrayal, the easiest thing is to shut every door and tell yourself you're safe. But safe isn't alive. Safe isn't love. Safe is just another kind of prison. So I keep the porch open. Sometimes a neighbor walks by and waves, sometimes not. And that's okay. The house is quiet now. No shouting, no staged dinners, no performances, just creaking floorboards and sunlight through dusty windows. I'm not healed, I know that. Some nights I dream about Delroy's voice calling me a failure. Other nights, I wake up thinking I'm back in that chair beside the kitchen doors, invisible all over again. But morning always comes. I always get up. And every morning, I carry that wooden chair outside, place it facing east, and sit. I tell myself, I'm not waiting for anyone to give me a place. I'm building my own. Maybe you've been waiting too. Waiting for someone to finally see you, to finally say, here's your seat. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you've given too much for people who only took. I get that. But maybe it's time. Time to stop waiting. Time to build your own. Don't build walls. Build doors, even if no one walks through. Because someday, someone might. And even if no one does, at least you're free. The family? Delroy, Carlene. They never called again. I stopped waiting for them to. Jareth. He's quiet. I don't know if he's angry or ashamed. Maybe both. Maybe neither. I stopped guessing. I still leave the chair next to mine empty, but not forever. I believe someone will sit there one day. Maybe not family. Maybe not anyone I know yet, but someone. And when they do, I'll pour them coffee. I'll say, welcome. And I'll mean it, because some families teach you love. Mine taught me how to survive.